China and Canada have now reached, it looks like an agreement to start bringing in Chinese cars, man. Let's tune into the video, see what's going on in the streets.
Federal Finance Minister Francois Philippe Champagne has wrapped up a trip to China focused on trade and finance. Champagne says he told his Chinese counterparts that Canada wants to resolve any trade irritants between the two countries, including a 25% Chinese tariff on Canadian pork. With me now is former Canadian diplomat in Beijing and senior fellow at Synopsis, Charles Burton. Mr. Burton, welcome. How significant was this trip in building Canada-China relations?
I don't think there have been any announcements of any progress at all. It seems to be mostly about building the strategic partnership, trying to establish more rapport with the Chinese Communist business networks. In this case, Mr. Champagne is the Minister of Finance. He's not the Minister of International Trade or the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And so the delegation was primarily banking and insurance executives and others such as Brookfield Asset Management that has had a close connection with our Prime Minister in the past. And I think there's a lot of non-tariff barriers to access for Canadian financial services and insurance into China. And we hope that if we're able to give the Chinese regime what they want, that maybe we can expand our business opportunities there. And the Minister Champagne did meet with the Chinese Vice Premier Ko Li-feng, who said that there would be a Chinese delegation coming to Canada to continue the engagement in this area. So, nothing's happened, but maybe we're, I don't know, breaking the ground for possible benefits to Canada from the strategic partnership and our downplaying of the non-trade areas like human rights and foreign interference, Chinese espionage, and so on. That and of course the concerns over forced labor products coming into Canada that we're keeping under the outside of public discussion with a view to the Chinese being more amenable to seeing things our way in terms of more fair and equal trade between our two nations.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes sense. I thought stuff was actually solidified. I thought things were, on paper, but it looks like they're still doing the talks. They're still doing the negotiations, which, anything could change. Anything could change. And I know if Donald Trump has anything to do with it, a lot is going to change. A lot is definitely going to change. PF says, yes, the military is the greatest and the baddest. Nobody's denying that. But why haven't they opened up the Strait of Hormuz yet? They can't touch the Strait of Hormuz. I don't think that they want to even bother with that. And we're going to get into it a little bit later with what France's government had to say about the Strait of Hormuz and this war. But I don't think the U.S. wants to touch the Strait of Hormuz because, first of all, we don't get anything. They don't get any benefits from going over there. We don't get our oil from there. Our allies get their oil from there, but we don't get anything shipped through the Strait of Hormuz. So it really doesn't affect us. It's affecting the rest of the world. It's really affecting the rest of the world. Swab says running over people and dogs. Are you talking about the Chinese cars? Goodness.
That certainly came into the spotlight over the past week, of course, with the MP Michael Ma and some comments that he made that he has since apologized for. Those tariffs, though, those pork and seafood tariffs do remain in place. Could we see a deal happening there as Canada continues these diplomatic and trade engagements with China?
Well, I think that China weaponizes these economic relations, and we saw the imposition of the tariffs because Canada imposed 100% tariff on the import of Chinese EVs under the Trudeau administration. And then, of course, the Chinese falsely claimed that there were problems with our canola seeds at the time of our detaining the Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou on a U.S. extradition request. So
Somebody said Trump is doing such a good job that Texas is turning blue and starting to vote blue. I never would have thought. I never would have thought that Texas would have turned blue. He was doing such a good job, bro. He was doing such a good job. I'm telling you, man, people are getting tired of it. People are getting tired
It's
of it.
possible that if we make further concessions to China, including in non-trade areas such as Taiwan, the South China Sea, Canadian participation, interdiction of illegal UN sanction busting Chinese exports into North Korea and so on, that they might give us concessions on canola and meat. But based on our experience with dealing with the Chinese, if we displease the regime in some other way, then they could apply arbitrary non-tariff barriers to other areas such as potash or wood products or whatever. So it's very difficult to deal with the Chinese because they often violate the spirit of contractual relationships. And, our canola farmers have really seen this in spades. And I think, the canola industry is really considering whether they should be using more canola to produce biofuel instead of the reliance on an uncertain Chinese customer.
Now, after Carney's trip in January, U.S. President Donald Trump threatened a 100% tariff on Canadian goods if Canada makes a deal with China. Do you see a strong reaction coming from Trump this time around?
I think it's possible that it will come into the CUSMA negotiations, for one thing. With regard to the Canadian failure to prevent the products of forced labor from coming into our market, there are quite a number of products available, including food products, which are quite explicitly from the Chinese Xinjiang Construction and Production Corps. That, under the Section 301 investigation, would lead to a 25% additional tariff put on us. So unless we can really get our act together more rapidly to comply with the U.S. demands on the import of forced labor products, we could have more difficulties with our access to the U.S. market. And, as came up in the industry committee hearing that you made reference to, Margaret McQuaig Johnson, who is a specialist in this area, suggests that the aluminum being used in Chinese EVs is produced through forced labor practices. So how can we bring in those EVs without forced labor produced aluminum? Mr. Champagne said that he would be raising this matter of supply chain transparency with the Chinese, and he said that he did raise human rights with the Chinese government, but based on our new policy of not criticizing the Chinese regime publicly, people like you and me and the Canadian public don't have absolute clarity on where this stands and how the Chinese responded to whatever he might have said to them.
Yes, some critics certainly saying it came across that way over the past week. We'll have to leave it there, sir. Thank you very much for your time. That is former Canadian Let
me know y'all thoughts about this down in the comments below.